Triple H sat down with Ariel Helwani in Cardiff and gave his longest interview since taking over as the head of creative. Over an hour long, they covered a lot of topics. I'll just get into some of them here. And this is what got a lot of people talking this week. He was asked if he felt that the rebranding of NXT, the move to 2.0, was punishment for losing the Wednesday Night War to AEW. He goes, no. People put so much pressure on this competitive war. It was never that. First of all, they beat our developmental system. Good for them. No, it was never that. There was never ever pressure to, you have to beat that or you have to beat them. It was just put on the best product that you could. Now, that, of course, is the kind of answer that you would expect Triple H to say. What else is he going to say? Is he going to come right out and say, yeah, there was some competitive, juices flowing there? Of course not. He's going to give the corporate stock answer. And if he was punished for it, and you know that Vince McMahon looked at that and had to be disappointed and say, man, if this guy can't carry the load against AEW on Wednesdays, how is this guy going to run Raw and SmackDown one day? Little did he know that he would have no choice but to step aside and Triple H would take over anyway a year later. Or 2 years later. But the reality is Triple H is the one who put those quotes out there. And I know it's been circulating on social media, so, you don't need me to play it for you. You've heard, and he said it more than once, too. Going back 5-6 years about this is no longer developmental. Of course, there are going to be developmental talents that were on the NXT show that they want to get them in the ring to work with people like Finn Balor, and to work with people like Adrian Neville and Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens and all of those guys, Adam Cole, all those guys, right? But the vast majority of the talent that you saw on that NXT show for years, they were not developmental talent. They were established talents who already came in with experience, who were being groomed for call-ups eventually to the main roster. A lot of the people that you see right now on the main roster came out of NXT, but they were not developed in NXT. Some of them were. Bianca Belair, Rhea Ripley, there are success stories that you can point to, but a lot of them were not. Triple H went out there and he said, this is no longer developmental. This is a third brand. You have Raw, you have SmackDown, and now you have number 3 that happens to be called NXT. That is how he chose to promote the brand for the longest time. That is what he said. Those were his words. And when NXT won the Battle of the Brands at Survivor Series 3 years ago, Raw and SmackDown didn't get beat by developmental. So I heard what he said there, and I just thought to myself, man, what a burial of that NXT talent roster at the time, the way he just dismissed it like that. Oh, you beat our developmental system, good for you. I wonder what those guys think, and those girls think, the ones who believed in all the bullshit that he said and all the rah-rah speeches and rallying the troops and all that, and we're not developmental, we are NXT, and part of that was just him being a promoter, I'm sure, and trying to just get everybody fired up and believing in his vision. But what a burial of the talent on that roster. Now NXT is a full-on developmental show, absolutely. But at the time, it was developmental only when it was convenient for them to call it developmental. And when it wasn't, it was their third brand on national television on USA Network. For him to say that as passive-aggressively as he did, he is being disingenuous. And I'm sure part of it also is that it still burns him that they got beat and they got bounced over to Tuesdays. It was embarrassing for him. In their minds, I'm sure they thought that this is going to be easy. This is going to be like cake. We're WWE. We're a global brand. We have a heads up. We already have a leg up and a head start on these guys. This is not going to be all that difficult. Well, turned out to be a lot more difficult than they expected. You don't think that these people didn't get a bruised ego based on what happened there in the head-to-head with AEW? So, of course that played a role in it. Now, Triple H is not the only one to make dumb comments. Chris Jericho last summer flat out said that, we're 3 to 6 months away, max, from Dynamite beating Monday Night Raw. It became pretty clear that wasn't going to happen, and now there's even less of a chance of that happening. Now that Raw is back over 2 million viewers, although they might go back down now that Monday Night Football is starting. But Raw now is having this rebirth. It's having this renaissance. Even when Raw was at its lowest, they still never beat Raw. There were some demo numbers where they may have beaten them or they tied them or whatever, but didn't work out the way Chris Jericho said that it was going to work out. And Jericho was really pissed about Triple H's comments when he was asked about them on Inside the Ropes on Friday. Let me read you his response here. He said, "Once again, it's just changing the narrative and changing the history, which makes me laugh." And that part of it, by the way, he's not telling lies. That part of it is true. He says, because when it started, it was not developmental. It was a third brand. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon, and all the other bullshit they said. So, of course, we beat the developmental or whatever you want to call it, but who gives a shit? It's such old news, and the show sucks. NXT sucks. It's not a good show, and they know it. Whether they were punished or not, they probably were punished. That's probably why Triple H said those things, because he is angry that we beat them, and he is probably angry that we exist. But you know, we don't care about WWE. We care about our show. We care about putting on the best stories that we can put on. We care about building our fan base and building our ratings. We will continue to exist, and I will tell you this. My boss has a lot more money than his boss does. A lot more. So you want to go to that, and we are not going anywhere. We will continue to grow. That pisses them off, and why wouldn't it? They had a monopoly for so long and don't like the fact that we exist, and that's fine. We don't care that they exist. God bless them. They are running a show in front of 50,000 people. Why would he care about us? But you know, he should. And he does. And that's why he said those things. He was kind of all over the place. I don't know where that came from about how my boss has more money than your boss. I have no fucking idea what that's supposed to mean. I mean, that's like my dick is bigger than your dick. Who gives a shit? But you know, I have to say this. For a company that doesn't care about WWE, Chris Jericho says, hey, we in AEW, we don't care about WWE. We don't think about them. We focus on our own. You know, for a company that doesn't care about WWE, they sure do mention them a lot. They sure do mention them a lot. They always have them on the tip of their tongue. So Jericho didn't do himself any favors with that interview either. Ariel threw out some names for Triple H to talk about as far as potential returns on Sasha Banks. He said time will tell. Said there was a communication breakdown, but that she is supremely talented and she could do whatever she wants. It just comes down to what she wants to do right now. He asked about Braun Strowman, and he said that we'll see. He called him a polarizing person sometimes, but for a guy his size and what he brings to the table, he said he's an amazing athlete. If this is what he wants to do at the highest of levels, then I would like nothing more than to give him another shot. The PW Insider is reporting that Braun Strowman is already back with WWE, and he will be at Raw tomorrow night in Kansas City. I guess he is done controlling his narrative. Narrative controlled. Mission accomplished. His release was shocking in that he was always positioned at or near the top of the card. So like a Bray Wyatt, you know, when they release a big name like that, it's going to be very surprising. Doesn't happen very often. And people shit on Braun. I've shit on him for some of the dumb stuff that he said on social media in the past. But there was a period of time in 2017 where the guy was on fire. He and Seth Rollins both. They were the two most over baby faces on that roster. He was getting the monster push. And they should have belted him. And instead, he got mowed down by Brock Lesnar at no mercy with one F5, just like everybody else. Just another guy. And that was that. And Brock moved on. Brock's like a tornado. And Braun got sucked up into the tornado. And after all the damage was done and the debris was strewn all over the place, the tornado moved on to the next victim. Now, eventually, they did put the title on him. But that was years later. It was too late. He wasn't nearly as over by then. Now he's been gone for almost a year. They say absence makes the heart grow fonder. I know he's gotten himself in tremendous shape. I've seen the pictures. Triple H is looking for names, and Braun Strowman still has a name. Strowman would not have worked in AEW, and Tony Khan was not interested in bringing him in, obviously, or else he would have. WWE is where he made his name. He would not have been at the top of my list, but I'm okay with giving him another chance. People saying, oh, Braun can't work. He sucks. For a guy his size, Braun Strowman actually moves around very well. He's not terrible. He's not Omos. Omos is terrible. Braun Strowman in the ring is not terrible. When they used Strowman as a monster doing power spots and feats of strength and things like that, that's what got him over. And maybe it can again. His feud with Roman Reigns was great. It's what put him on the map. Just because you don't like the guy, let's not pretend that everything he did sucked and he was terrible. They got rid of him largely to get rid of his fat contract. They were paying him a ton of money. I'm sure whatever they signed him for, it was a lot less this time around.